The movie starts after a mysterious, unnamed virus wipes out every human being. Philip Miller is the last man on Earth. He has been living alone for the past year and is driving around America in search of other survivors. After his failed mission to find other humans, Philip decides to return to his hometown, Tucson. As a last attempt to find someone, he writes "Alive in Tucson" on every billboard he can find. Upon arriving, he goes to his shabby apartment and packs up all the necessary supplies before heading to a gated community in the more affluent part of the city. He chooses the biggest house and declares it his new home. Over the next few days, he decorates the house with famous paintings, a mat from the White House, a dinosaur skull, Academy Awards, and many other artifacts worth billions of dollars. Nicolas Cage would be proud. Every night before going to sleep, Philip makes sure to apologize to God for masturbating so much and wishes that he could see the face of at least one woman before he dies. Thankfully, he still has plenty of cars to drive around. He goes to the grocery store in his underwear and breaks in using a gun. In just a year, he has completely forgotten basic decency. Now that there's no one to impress, he does whatever he wants. This includes impulsive acts he never would have dared before the virus. The chaos gives him a small adrenaline rush and helps him cope with the loneliness. After about a month, he starts to lose his grip on reality. Spending his birthday alone reminds him of everything he failed to appreciate when life was normal. He misses his mother, his old life, and human interaction in general. A few months later, his once grand mansion has turned into a dump, filled with plastic and cans that he never bothers to clean up. After all, what's the point? He hasn't showered in days and has started living like an animal. With no running water, the toilet is covered in plastic bottles. So Philip makes a hole in the diving board and uses the pool as his toilet instead. He also fills a kiddie pool with margaritas and bathes in it while simultaneously drinking from it. Let's just hope he never gets the two pools mixed up. One day he goes to a bar and draws faces on volleyballs, assigning them names and personalities. He talks to them as if they're real friends just to feel less alone. At night he brings a ball named Gary to a clothing store and flirts with a mannequin he has a crush on. When her arm breaks, Philip loses his mind. Deciding he no longer wants to live, he drives to a nearby hill to end it all. He bids farewell to his ball friends, promising to remember them for eternity. Then he gets into his car and accelerates toward the hill at full speed. Just before the car crashes, he sees smoke rising in the distance. He immediately follows the smoke and arrives at a trailer that is clearly inhabited. Then he notices something he has been longing to see for the past year. Someone has left their bra out to dry in the sun. Overwhelmed, he picks it up, smells it, and faints. When he wakes up, he finds himself in the lap of a beautiful woman. She seductively promises to fulfill his wishes and leans in to kiss him. Just as he starts to enjoy it, he suddenly wakes up, realizing it was all a dream. The real woman in front of him is older and far less attractive. She had been performing CPR on him to bring him back. They awkwardly pull away, both startled to see another human being after so long. Philip, still dazed, asks where the beautiful woman went. The stranger, however, points out a more pressing issue: his wet underpants. It turns out that he peed himself while unconscious. Even in this bizarre situation, Philip desperately tries to defend himself, claiming that he had been swimming earlier, which is why his underwear is wet. His frantic explanation only makes the woman more nervous. Panicked, she pulls out a gun and orders him to stay away. Philip finally admits that he did, in fact, pee himself, and feels embarrassed. After both of them calm down, they introduce themselves. The woman's name is Carol. She was an analyst before the virus and has been wandering around America ever since everyone else died. She saw the "Alive in Tucson" sign and came to see if she was truly the last person alive. Although Philip had been desperate to meet a woman, he isn't exactly thrilled to see Carol. She constantly corrects his grammar, doesn't understand his jokes, and keeps talking about irrelevant things. After some conversation, they decide to drive to the grocery store. On the way, Carol scolds him for running a stop sign. Despite Philip arguing that there is no traffic, she insists they must follow the rules or else they'll start living like animals. Her nagging doesn't stop when they reach the grocery store. When Philip parks in a handicapped spot, they get into their fifth argument of the day. He insists that this imaginary handicapped person has plenty of parking options, but when Carol still urges him to park somewhere else, he simply drives the vehicle straight into the store instead. Later, Carol visits his house and is disgusted by the way he lives. He has two swimming pools, one filled with feces and the other with garbage. She also accuses him of stealing the paintings, though Philip argues that they don't belong to anyone anymore. By the end of the tour, Philip has had enough and asks her to go back to her campsite. The next morning, he wakes up to find Carol cleaning his house. She nags him to get gardening and cleaning supplies from the store because, according to her, they have to start living like human beings. That night, Philip vents to his ball buddies about Carol. Even though he has only known her for a day, he already feels like they are a married couple who desperately need a divorce. The following morning, things get worse when Carol moves into the house next door. He tries to shoo her away, but Carol, being Carol, is stubborn. She asks if he's scared of being seen naked, and in response, Philip takes off his pants. Finally, Carol addresses the elephant in the room: reproduction. She believes they are the chosen ones, destined to repopulate the earth. Philip bluntly states that he wouldn't sleep with her even if she were the last woman on earth, which, ironically, she is. In the next scene, Philip is in his outdoor toilet when Carol approaches him. She wants him to find a way to get running water to their home so they can grow tomatoes and other crops. When he refuses to help, she tries to bribe him with fresh tomatoes, but he doesn't care. She should know better than to try bribing a guy who poops off a diving board. However, when night falls, Philip sneaks into her garden and eats all of her vegetables. The next morning, Carol knocks on his door and finds him covered in tomato remnants. Even then, he denies stealing them. He also notices that Carol has injured her leg while trying to transfer water to her house from a manhole. A few days later, she finally gives up on trying to live like a decent human. Philip catches her making an outdoor toilet in a fountain, copying his swimming pool toilet. Carol starts to think they might not be the chosen ones after all, but rather the forgotten ones with no purpose in life. After all, if they can't even set up a proper toilet in their million-dollar mansions, how could they possibly rebuild civilization? Philip, who is used to seeing Carol as an annoyingly optimistic person, feels bad for her. So, he goes to the city's water tank and sets up a system to water her garden. Carol is finally happy to see a good side to him and invites him to dinner. That night, Philip enjoys an organic meal for the first time in ages. The topic of sex comes up again, and this time Philip says he's ready to sleep with her. To his surprise, Carol doesn't want to have sex before marriage. At first, Philip laughs, thinking it's a joke, but she's completely serious. Even though the idea is ridiculous to him, he proposes just to make her happy. The next day, they decide to get married. In the following scene, they are in a church saying their vows. Philip thinks it's unnecessary but goes along with it anyway. When they step outside, they are greeted by a large crowd of wedding guests. Philip realizes he has made a terrible mistake and screams, then wakes up in his bed, relieved that it was just a dream. A while later, Carol comes over with food. She suggests they elect a president of the United States. Even though it's completely pointless, Philip votes for himself and wins by unanimous decision. They then celebrate by eating spaghetti and raisin balls, which Carol insists are a great alternative to meatballs. Finally, the day of the wedding arrives. Carol prepares the decorations and cake while Philip is tasked with getting wedding rings. Instead of doing that, however, he throws a bachelor party for his ball buddies, setting random things on fire in a parking lot. He even goes to say goodbye to his mannequin girlfriend, telling her she will always be the love of his life. At the end of the day, he arrives at the church where Carol has set up a recording to officiate their wedding. After brief vows, it's time to exchange rings, only for Carol to discover that Philip never got them. Realizing she is the only one putting effort into the relationship, she calls off the wedding. Later that night, Philip knocks on her door trying to talk to her, but she doesn't respond. Frustrated, he breaks down the front door with a hammer, only to be surprised. She had actually put in effort to decorate their home, and even made a wedding cake with a statue of him on top. Philip feels awful and apologizes. He also confesses that he doesn't really like her personality or her cooking, but despite that, he's glad she exists. Without her, he wouldn't have survived this long. To make it up to her, Philip takes her to a jewelry store, where she picks out all the rings she wants. This time, they actually go through with the wedding. That night, they finally consummate their marriage. But the experience is not what Philip expected. Carol can't stop talking the entire time, making bizarre remarks that she believes are sexy. The next morning, she finds him playing racquetball at home. Expecting her to nag him again, he's surprised when she joins in the game instead. They spend the rest of the day doing things Philip would normally do, making fireproof suits and setting each other on fire, running a bulldozer over beer cans, and visiting Philip's mannequin ex-girlfriend. For the first time, Philip is glad he married Carol, and thinks their life together might actually be tolerable. As they drive home, they suddenly crash into a limo at an intersection. Panicked, Philip rushes to the car, only to see a beautiful woman step out of it. Just when he thought he was happy with Carol, he immediately starts regretting their marriage. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you on the next video.